we'll proceed with the format again, lecture, and then I'll show you example for the chapter 4, and I'll show you an example for chapter 10 as well. And then we also would like to tackle Madia's point. We have less questions, but I did obtain a lot of good summary, so I would use that as well. And then second session would be whiteboarding again, SQL queries. Third session would be, we'll do the building database again. Hopefully we get far. And I'll try this time around to hopefully help someone who's not yet finished with the hands-on. Okay, go ahead, Sean.
On the knowledge check, there's only one attempt for week 4.
Week 4? Oh, okay, I'll change that. Okay. So, yeah, if there's any problem with submission, I'm really fine with you guys for submitting. I'm looking forward to more of like a good output, good writing. Okay, also, maybe during the break, you can let me know which group you want. I'm more into like, you can choose whatever group makes you want, right? And we'll just do that before the first break ends. So we can start now. Lesson 4 is about database design. It's more like definitions again and definitions. We'll be tackling chapter 5 and chapter 10. Both of them are pretty short, I think, so that's fine. We can have more time with the SQL exercises. So the data definition and naming, we came from last week with corporate data model, what data that the corporate needs, and what's we're hoping that the scope that the data is utilized would be used by a lot of departments as well. So meaning we have to define them clearly. That's why we need to create a data definition and naming so that we have a guideline for the whole company or department that they can follow, and so that it's consistent and it's not confusing. Later I'll give you a very good example for that one. Guidelines for data definition: provide minimum acceptance level of descriptive information for users of data. So again, this just provides like everyone knows what it is and everyone accepts for what it is. So it should be very easily understood. Should be specific to the organization as well. It's going back to the previous chapter that we don't want to get data and define a data that's not useful for us. Right? And elements of data definitions, there's a lot. There's name, label, synonyms, aliases, description, format, and so on and so forth. So we can go ahead with the first example from the textbook. So given this item, salary, we can have a synonym or another name for it, remuneration. It's been a long time since I heard that word, but it's being used. Yep. And this one would basically describe what it is. So you just don't go, okay, salary, and then you don't know what it is. You have to really clearly define what it is for, right? So could be
Monthly, yearly salary.
Yeah, you can also mention that. Monthly, yearly, but before that you have to define what it is for. Like, is it employees? Like, what type of currency are we paying, right? Performance bonus. So even the format is currency. Value list, not applicable. Think of the value list as like the drop down that you can choose, male or female. It doesn't have that. Validation criteria. This is very good. When you have something like a validation criteria, if let's say your what you call this, encoder, meaning you input data for your company. If let's say you don't have this validation criteria and you accidentally put -100 and it goes through, that's terrible. Because like it will be weird for the system. It might even deduct the employee's salary instead of adding or nothing, right? So once you put that in your system, you're sure that at least they'll not get a negative number, right? So salary could be 0 and there's no limit, okay? Well, for other organizations, let's say you're a nonprofit and you really want to cap your salary, that's the time you can say, okay, no one can get paid higher than 150K. So you can put that there as well. So valid operations that you can do, basically you can do this: multiply, divide, add, subtract, divide. Why? Because again, you would have different queries. You need to, let's say you have salary, that's gross salary. Now you deduct your expenses, now you have net salary. Or you also can multiply to get your tax rate for your salary as well. So you can get more stuff, again, when you query. Ownership, basically this data is being owned by the HR director because they handle the salary, basically. Users, HR management system, and payroll system. Okay. Source would be interview deputy HR manager, and they basically put a timestamp when it was last maybe created. Yeah, same as here. And author and last updated, because again, definitions can change based on the requirements as well. So another example from the textbook is basically relationship. Let's say you're applying, and I applied as a student. Definitely, let's say you have an emergency contact information. They would ask you, who do you want to put as your emergency contact? So now you have a value list that you just choose one. Or again, if it's a list, it depends. If the user interface lets you choose one, fine. Sometimes it lets you choose two or more. Okay? There's no validation criteria. So there's no valid operations as well. And again, ownership is the HR because they deal with people. Okay? So with this one, now this one looks like what we learned in the corporate data model and like relationship diagrams. Is basically once you have, let's say, a person, your object or your entity, you now should define what are those. May also be known as person emergency contact, and each person next of kin must be nominated by one and only one person, and must be resident at one and only one address. Again, remember when you applied in this school, you have to enter emergency contact information. This is basically defining those data definition. And again, the person next of kin should have an attribute of name or relationship. When I was working with the International Student Office, if you guys miss this out, I have to give that back to the advisor, and the advisor should talk to the student again, and then go back, and then goes back to me, and I enter that in the database. Okay? So, basically what our data definitions would have three things, three elements. You have prime, modifier, class. The prime is basically this one, person. That's your entity, right? And now once you have your entity, you should have a modifier to make it explicit, meaning it's clear to you. So, because why? If let's say the classes are color, name, right? When you say person, color, you might think, so what? The skin? So what? The eyes? So what? The hair? So that's why you need the modifier to now be very clear that you want to change person, hair, color, right? Think of this again is for this one, maybe for your any application, but for this one, I'm thinking more of like emergency contact again, or I don't know. Do they still ask this in application forms? But mostly for, again, creating your avatar online or game development, you really need to have this. Okay, I think that's for chapter 4. Let's see. It should be consistent, unique, meaningful. It must aid for communicating with developers of information system and system analysts. So before that, let's spend some time with this example. So when I was working in Thomson Reuters, I was adding stuff in the World Scope database. So basically it's their own database that they use. But interestingly, it's funny that when I was working there, I've never really thought of we have this document because we were just trained and we just do stuff. But because I was preparing for job hunting as well, I tried to search what is World Scope database, and first, let's go to the list. So, this one. So the list first. Where's the list? Did I skip it? There we go. So list. So in my day-to-day job, what I usually do, let's just go back to the top. I grab a annual report, quarterly report. I open the document. I read the assets, liabilities, and equity section, right? However, even though they have a standard, let's say the US GAAP way of accounting standards, turns out data companies, or again, Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg, those that provide numbers in the TV screen, they have their own way of collecting data. They have their own category, right? So I'll just give an example. Like for example, I'll just give an example when you have, okay, product segment that you see in the annual report, net sales or other sales. In Thomson, maybe they are going to teach us, oh, the policy is you see anything with sales, just put it here. Now it becomes different, right? And now, let's check one. Anyone can choose. What do you want? Shareholders. You want income statement? Choose.
Income statement.
Okay, which in income statement?
The capitalized 01255.
01255. Let's see. So here's an example of a data definition there. Right? For us, we have, sometimes there's ambiguity in reports as well. So we have to really follow this. Represents an allowance on borrowed funds used for long-term projects or construction. Why do we have to follow that? Because there might be some companies that, let's say, they report this as, they report the term as interest coverage. But when we look further within the notes, they're using it like interest capitalized. So now we have the option to, okay, it's interest coverage, but the way they're using it, it's like interest capitalized. So in our system, I'll put it as interest capitalized. So it makes more sense to the user, subscriber, investor. Why are we doing that? Because we want to standardize the data. You have a different reporting, your company. You have a different reporting company. We're trying to make one standard so that when I give out that information, you can compare them clearly. Okay? Let's try to see maybe two more. So I think we have cash flow statement. What else do we have here? Pension, shareholders, equity, EPS, DPS, earnings per share. Let's see. How about, let's see if this has a data definition. Might not have. Let's see, how about the short-term debt? This one. So for us, this becomes harder and harder because we want to put in our database, which is, it's called short-term debt and current portion of long-term debt. And we have to analyze the report that it should be along this, the scope. Could be a notes payable arising from short-term borrowings. It could be bank overdrafts. It could be current portion of long-term debt. And again, what's to know that they also specify this is for all industries, but then again, if you're processing a bank, it also includes federal funds, right? Short-term investments, we should include stocks, bonds, marketable securities, time certificates of deposit, time deposits, municipal securities, money market mutual funds. It should exclude, though, commercial papers issued by unconsolidated subsidiary to parent companies, and promissory notes, amount due from sale of debentures. Right. Let's check one last. About this one. Cash and due from banks. So in this item, we want to include deposits, promissory notes, deposit in the Federal Reserve Bank. For non-US corporations, we should include vault cash, collection exchanges, checks on matured bonds, postal checking accounts, bills for collection, reserves maintained, and so on and so forth. So here's a glimpse. I'll give this file as well. It's public, so it's fine. But it's kind of old already. It's still Thomson Financial. It's now Thomson and Reuters. Okay. So going back, now chapter 4 is done. Any questions? I think it's pretty straightforward. Moving on, this is a short chapter as well based on the textbook. So database administration basically provides the expertise, the knowledge of managing database to the enterprise on all matters that impact on database design. The database administrator should also ensure that the database design can cope with future data requirements. As you said last week, it should be future-proof. That's one of the job of the database administrator. Again, you as an entry-level, let's say SQL developer, business analyst, most of the time you shouldn't really care right now for the future-proof because you're not designing it. Okay. Need to be thoroughly familiar with the principles, both theoretical and practical, underlying various database management systems. So not only that you should be knowledgeable about those first normal form, second normal form, third normal form, or the BN, what form is that? But you also have to know like what database to use, what's the best for your information system. Let's say in your ecosystem of your other software, what's the best compatibility? Because even I remember when I was developing, I was using Rails, but the easiest hosting provider that I can just deploy my code, they say it's Heroku. So I go Heroku. But there's other options as well. So same with database. Even though you have MySQL, Postgres, and MySQL Server, if you're in Microsoft, you're better off using a Microsoft SQL database management system. You would have better compatibility, less prone to consistency errors, something like that. Management of the security of the database, monitoring performance of the database, guarding against catastrophic database failures, management of upgrade or changes. So security part of the database, making sure that all users create a user ID or password, that's one. It's still normal to see that there's a lot of admin, no password. So as a database administrator, you should really avoid allowing users to create an account without any password at all. So another thing that you can do is you can basically implement logging because your database can be attacked, which you can't really foresee, right? But if there's no way for you to log whatever that's happening, you don't even know when it happened, who used what account, or whatever, because it can be an insider attack. And again, based on information security, insider attack is less likely, but most of the huge financial losses comes from insider attack, meaning a former employee, an employee, basically someone in your company, right? Next, monitoring the performance of the database. I remember we quickly touched about having replications of database. If you're now having more users, if you have now more users, basically you would try to scale your database as well. You can add more database, redirect the users to whatever they're doing. Are they doing write? Are they doing read? And so forth. Guarding against catastrophic database failure. As I mentioned, you can do replication, right? Or you can host it on the cloud. You can have it in other regions and make sure that when someone's down, it automatically redirects to the other database. So the user feels like, nothing happened. Go ahead.
I would like to make a distinction between guarding against catastrophic failures for auditability and liability,
Go ahead.
and for recovery. Because if you care about auditability and liability, you want this data, like Google backs up data inside a mountain, like on tape drives in a refrigerated room, but Google does not consider that recovery, because they can't just say like, oh, our database crashed, like this is we're gonna just slide all this data back into a new database to make our application. It would take weeks, months, however long. So there are two kinds of data integrity. There's a hot standby database that is replicated to from your master, that when that crashes, you just redirect all the traffic to the one that's just been sitting there. That is a recovery guard.
Good.
And I only make that distinction because there are a lot of like database administrators that think, oh yeah, we back up everything to S3 like once a week, and it's like, okay, but how fast can you get that big S3 SQL script that's get generated and push it into a new database and have it back online?
So that comes to, it also connects to the next topic about training their DB administrator. Is like, you don't just create one S3, you can just say that next time you create, make sure you configure it that it has replication, it has availability with multiple availability zones in AWS. I don't know if that works.
And Microsoft also supports the same thing. You actually in both, it's really easy. You just click a button and it says multi-AZ availability. You just click it and it's like, cool.
Yeah, and just to give you a glimpse right now, if you haven't had experience with AWS or Azure, you're just thinking, okay, let's just say S3 is a storage, right? Okay, think of it as the same of database because you store data. When you think of S3, you might think, oh, it's just S3. No, there's a lot of tiers. So there's S3, the regular, S3 infrequent access, S3 glacier, S3 whatever, and it depends now on your use case. For example, S3 glacier, meaning you put your files that you don't really need. Let's say you just need them every 7 years because of audit. So now it's so freaking cheap. But then again, the retrieval is so slow. So then again, so if you chose an S3 that's also very cheap, that doesn't have multiple, it's S3 one zone, I think, you run the risk of when it's down, you might not get.
I believe S3 by default forces you to have more than one AZ.
Cool.
I believe that that's just by default because it under the hood it's backed up a lot of places. Like they do some wizardry under there that I can't exactly talk about to make it so that like when you hit that endpoint that's on the internet and you say I want this file, it can grab it from any number of places. Although if the main where it's supposed to come from is down, you might see that in the form of like it takes more milliseconds because S3 is actually grabbing it from somewhere else.
Cool. And just a fun fact to end our conversation, most of services they provide in cloud, database, or S3, they also always say this, at the very basic level, you get 11 nines of, durability or availability. Basically, it's 99, and then 99.999999999 plus the 99. So it's 99.9 more nines %. And if you try to make an analogy, you basically have a higher likelihood that you get hit by a meteor than your data getting lost. So, fun fact. And then I don't know why not a lot of people were happy. But okay, I think this is towards the end of the chapter 10, education and training, day-to-day activities of administering users and their access rights. Basically, they have to keep learning about backup and recovery techniques, database configuration and tuning. More advanced course database instances may be incorporated into a federated distributed data system. Means that, as in any tech job, learning is constant. So there's a lot of techniques, always a lot of ways to improve how you deal with your system. And I guess we'll deal with Muddy's point before showing a quick example of chapter 10. So Muddy's point, this was shared by, I think, Sean, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So he gave a good summary. So when we go back again to the components of data definition, you would have prime, modifier, and the last one again is the class. So he said like prime is basically a noun that's used to represent the data. The class word is what type of data, example, text, number, identifier. Modifier, making the name unique. Again, make sure that when you say again person color, you need to specify person eye color, right? Specify. Example out of text, employee employment start date. Prime term, employee prime term, start date is the modifier term. Because you can also have employee employment end date. That's when, go ahead.
How exact is the mapping of this to an entity? Because like I see a clear correlation between prime, modifier, and with entity, attribute, and then value.
So I think if we want to try to map it out, like for example, person, you can have a person table.
Yeah, that's going to be your entity.
Yeah, but
And
I
then
know it's kind of weird because you put this in two columns, right?
And then your height, or your height, your family, all of those look like they'd actually be attributes, and then name and color, those would be your data type.
Yes.
Those would be like, what is this? Is it a number? Is it a date? Is it a...
So good point, because this can give you a clue. You use varchar, and this maybe you could do a list, and there's a drop down. There's only a finite set of standard colors that we want, and date as well. You can also pick, and it's a different data type. It's the date and time data type. Okay, and then moving on. This one was provided by, forgot. You guys remember who posted this one?
I don't think we see each other's Muddy's points.
Maybe they're not here. Data element is an atomic unit of data that has precise meaning or precise semantics. Has identification such as data element name, clear data element definition, one or more representation terms, optional enumerated values code, list of synonyms, very important, list of synonyms to data elements in other metadata registries, synonym ring. Another question was, does every enterprise use the same way to define or name their data? No, the answer is no. That's why we create our own. That's why I showed you an example. Thomson Financial, that's their way of collecting data. So let's say Bloomberg, they would have their own data definition as well. Okay?
It's also why there are like 7 different database models that have their own special way they want to do stuff.
Mm-hmm. Slightly confused about the concern, that's you. For centralized data modeling, it is uncommon for a system to use a centralized data. I would agree as well. Because centralized data modeling is, I've seen it with when you put a CRM, SCM.
I've definitely seen it more with financials. Like
Yes.
you brought up the financials, and that might be because like there are legal requirements for like what this word means. But as far as I've seen, the idea is to avoid doing that if you can.
Yeah. So again, we can go back to the argument that it depends on the use case. Okay. Let's see. Does this mean that in database design it is more important to meet current needs? I think I forgot the whole sentence for this. But with this context, is it important to meet current needs? I would say yes. Let's say you have a schedule. You don't have time to future-proof you don't have the capability to even like future-proof your database design. Might as well just design it and make it work for now, but make sure that it's not complex right away so that you can easily change it and make it flexible. And before that, that's for the next session. Let's go to an example. So even like this one was one of my assignment submission before that I just created a blog out of it. but basically this is just how to secure your MySQL database as a user. So if you go to, I forgot what's the source. Oh, Center for Internet Security, and you would have a list of like, that's just the, you can just Google Center for Internet Security, and you can see basically a PDF or a report like benchmark best practices on what to do, right? So this would give you a lot of like notes. For example, let's say you disable interactive login, what's it applicable for, what's the description for this, and why would you need to do that? So the rationale for this is basically preventing MySQL user from logging interactively may reduce the impact of a compromised MySQL account. Okay. Let's go to a less technical one. So even in your personal MySQL DBMS, you can immediately first check ensure log error is not empty. So in this case, you just use this SQL statement and it would check your configuration and it should show you this table, log error and this value. Okay, it means that error logs contain data and events when MySQL ID starts or stops. It also shows when table needs to be assessed or repaired. It must generate a value, which it has a value. And then the reason for enabling error logging, it helps increase the ability to detect malicious attempts against MySQL and other vital messages. Again, I mentioned a while ago, it's very important to do logging so you can audit, right? We can skip this one. So log error verbosity is basically has three values. One is if its value is 1, you enable logging of error messages. If it's 2, you enable logging of error and warning messages. And if it's a value of 3, you enable logging of error, warning, and note messages. And again, you have to be careful on setting your logging configuration because you might log a lot of stuff that's not, unnecessary to you or would be better off without it, even though there's a risk because of, again, resources. Why? Because if you just log everything, you would use up a lot of storage space. It would cost a lot of money. An example would be, you could also log success. So let's say you got errors, right? But if you can also enable every SQL query transaction that's successful, please log it. So that you may encounter a lot of data with doing that as well. So ensure audit enabled logging. Let's see, let's skip that, I guess. You can provide authentication. Ensure SQL mode contains no auto-create users to prevent auto-creation of users when authentication information is not provided. So that's a risk. Let's say you don't have this. Basically, any users can just go in and the system automatically creates a user for them and they get access, which is bad. Ensure passwords are set for all MySQL accounts. Basically the same thing when you're handling your, let's say the CDU accounts that you have, you should set a password. And basically the SQL statement is very easy as well. You select the user, host from MySQL.user where authentication string is blank, okay? And in this query it says empty set, so in my DBMS, I don't have a user without a password, which is good. You can also set the default password lifetime to 90 days. It decreases the time available for attacker to compromise the password and does decrease the likelihood of getting attacked. I know it's annoying, even for us, like, oh, every 90 days you have to change password when you're working. But again, that's gonna mitigate some, hopefully, hackers. Ensure password complexity in place. Let's skip this in authentication. You can even check network connection server to your MySQL. Let's say You want to ensure it has SSL, secure socket layer, and it's set to yes. This avoids malicious attackers picking inside your system. And again, it's better to use SSL I think, and TLS for all network traffic when using untrusted networks. So in this case, it's disabled, which is bad. Okay, let's skip that, and now we can also do replication. Basically, with replication, you can monitor performance, security vulnerabilities. I don't know why it's mentioning Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, but
A lot of them do.
hmm?
I said a lot of websites end up mentioning Microsoft SQL. I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I know, but it's kind of weird because it was from an Oracle report, so I don't know if I had an error, but it was impossible because I was not looking in other documents. And it's just weird. Never mind. So has the following tools. You basically can view snapshot of agent status, view log reader agent status, and view synchronization status. Let's see. What can we? Oh, these are just, I think, simple settings like replication traffic between servers must be secured during replication transfer. Password can leak. So to audit, check if they're using a private network, a VPN, SSL, TSL, SSH tunnel. So in this case around, you don't even need to do SQL queries because this is more of like the network layer, right? So what you do is you check your computer and check what network are you using. Is it private? Is it public? Is it protected? Right? In this case, because it was a simulation in my home, so it's basically private network. And fun fact, when we have our home Wi-Fi, it's called Give Me Wi-Fi, and then we usually have a lot of guests coming in our house, just playing board games, whatever, and we set the password to, I don't know, maybe 243, and then most of them get lost. It's like, what's the password? I don't know, maybe 243. Yeah, but we changed it now, so never mind. Yeah, so even this one, master SSL verify cert. So even this one, I encourage you to explore, because this was during the time that I was still in MBA. I was doing my IT emphasis, and I don't have any background with database or coding at all. But if you're curious, just put stuff, enter stuff. You can write about stuff. You should be fine. You would learn stuff and eventually get there. All right, and I think that's it for. Want you to work on just basically one paper. You can collaborate using what's that? One Microsoft
Can you
Word.
use OneDrive, Google Drive.
Yeah,
or Google
OneDrive,
Docs.
whatever, Google Docs. So do that. Also, I know, I think some of the students mentioned that it's not required to follow the format. I'd still like you guys to do the paper template format, because I've already compared, not only in this class, in other classes as well. Students who use this format, I felt like their thought is clearer just because it has an outline already. And it's also easier for me to read whatever you're saying instead of each and every one of you having different formats. Again, because based now looking at the blackboard, it says it's not required. You'll not get deductions, but I just prefer it. So it's up to you. You can still do it your way, but it's fine. You don't have any deductions. So now on to the project. My requirements are fairly simple. Aside from these, from the execution, I'd rather you guys try to create this tables or database. Okay, why? Because I'm just afraid that there might be submissions that you just create any database and you just create two tables and then nothing, right? So it's easy to have, like, now I have this diagram. Think of it, I'm your designer. I give this to you. Create me the database and table. So that's your mission. And basically, aside from the written analysis, I'd like you guys to show me the tables, recreate this. If the image does not fit in this small template, you can put it in the appendix section or at the last page to show the big picture. That's fine. And now, form is optional because I did not teach you guys to create a form, meaning a view. what does a form means? So right now we're doing SQL queries in the console, right? But there's another way that you can create a graphical user interface so that someone can just put the data and not do the SQL queries. I don't require you to do that. So you can just scratch this. Queries, we've been doing that in class, right? The SQL exercises. And reports, there's two ways again. One, another way, there's a way to create reports with the graphical user interface. Think of it like when you use Microsoft Excel and then you click create a chart. So something like that. So this one, when you do a SQL query, you have a report. I don't require you to do that. That's why it says here, SQL query output would be enough. So just show me queries. Think of use cases. Say that, oh, maybe my manager would want this because we want to see the, again, membership costs or whatever. Because we want to see how many authors in the book, who's the most known publisher, whatever. And then basically your SQL query output would be enough. And then you would spend also time inserting data to this, okay? So you would spend time building the table, adding data, it's practice again, SQL query, and then creating use case, okay? Let me know if you have questions and you can move forward.
So is a copy of your data model, is it the same that you have there?
What do you mean?
Yeah, you said we like replicate that you
Yes.
have there. So the data model
I understand
is
the
the same that you have there?
Yep.
Like-
part when it comes to database development. The paper part is less.
So I
So
know.
we have to talk about the same that you have there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
We have to do the exactly same.
So
table.
here's the challenge. If you guys have a better idea, I'm totally fine you creating your own. Okay, but if you're like new to this and don't have any idea what to build, just follow this.
Okay.
It's easier instead of like I don't know what to do, right? But if you have something cooler, let's say you talk about games, whatever, and you do awesome tables, go for it. And then again, the topic, go for it. Want to focus more on the queries, the use case, and fine. Again, my very, very core is when I read your paper, I should understand it. That's the main point. I should understand. If I start reading, I don't know what you're saying, whether, even though let's say I understand technical, but when I read this thinking about I'm a regular person, I don't understand what you're saying. You're not using syntax highlighting or something like that. I don't know. And I may be lenient towards the earlier submissions, especially the papers, but as we go on forward, if you keep making the same simple mistakes, I might give bigger deductions on that. It's like when I had before the chance to teach players, we call that first time mistakes, we call it rookie mistakes. It's fine, your first time writing a paper. But if you keep doing that, we call that stupid mistakes. That's the time the players get scolded. So always don't forget that, don't repeat the same problems. And now because you collaborate, make sure that you talk to the other person, am I doing this right? The other person says either yes or I don't know as well, totally fine. Communicate to the other classmates, are we doing this right? Okay? If not, talk to me anytime, send an email. Are we doing this right? That's it. And then as long as I see the effort as well, that you tried your best and you communicated enough and you still didn't create a good output, I would know right away. Because let's say there's someone that's really having a hard time, but they're really making an effort out of it, right? You need to show that as well. Okay? Anyway, moving on. Going back, let's do the fun stuff. For those who weren't here last week, we did this. I don't know if you were, yeah. For those who weren't here last week, what we basically do is we stand up, choose a teammate, a pair. Let's do 3, 3, 3, 4 as well. But this time around, don't choose your teammates. Okay? So mix, and then we'll solve queries. Do it now. And then we'll whiteboard. Hey, do we have enough? pens? We do have enough pens. So stand up. Grab teams. Make sure they're not your group mates.
Make sure they're not our group.
Make sure they're not group mates. Or at least not all your group mates. For our first question, for our first foray into aggregates, we're going to stick to something simple. We want to know how many facilities exist. Simply produce a total count. And then as we do the exercise, I would always give you a clue or a syntax so you don't really get lost on what to do. So wait, because I have the answers on here. So be with your groupmates. Talk about how to do it. There's some there as well. Team A, Team B, Team C. Oh no, Team A, Team B, Team C, Team D. With different teams. Okay. So your first clue for that is basically you need the select and from, which everyone knows already. And with this exercise as well, I'm totally fine you guys Googling. So the next thing you need to Google is the count keyword. How do you use the count keyword? So quickly Google that, talk to your team, create your SQL queries, and let's check it. And then if you get the correct answer, I will just erase it so no one can see it for now.
Count syntax.
Take a picture of this so we can erase it as well.
Count in text.
Yeah.
Do that is like in this example, you do count, asterisk or a column name as count. And again, this basically is like substituting this one.
Like a label?
Like a label.
Yeah, there's a symbol on it.
Just gotta erase it. You can hardly see it.
Yep. Or else this would stop. Yeah, it doesn't have as well. Okay, that's very easy. Next, how can you produce an ordered list of the first 10 surnames in the members table? So the clue is it should be ordered. It should only have 10 and should not contain duplicates. So I'll give you clues on what keywords to search.
Order.
So you need the.
Have a better mark.
Nope, don't look at there. Don't look at there. You need the distinct keyword and the order by keyword and the limit keyword. Google how to use it. Have a result, one column labeled as surname. However, you want all the facility names and the surnames together. How do you do that?
Combining.
Let me see first. And because this is something new, I'll give you the keyword to Google. You need to Google union. U-N-I-O-N. Learn how to use it, write it down. Insert this data. It's also a pretty easy question, so I'm not going to give you a clue. I want you to insert this data.
Into the table?
Yes.
You want us to insert that table?
Okay.
So,
Any
question.
Go ahead.
Yes.
The facility ID is a primary key. Is it
ID?
a database generated primary key?
You can assume that. Sure.
Okay.
So
Because it says facility ID 9.
I would give two options. You can assume that facility ID is auto-generated, meaning you don't have to put the 9, or you can add it to yourself. Let's say it doesn't have an auto-generated number. Because again, when we go back to the previous week, we need to set is at auto increment. But if we haven't set that, we have to manually insert ID numbers. So there could be two correct answers. So which keyword do we need to use?
Insert.
Insert into. Yeah, okay. Should be very easy.
From the
Insert
table of city of city, like the first
and then
city
we
ID and the
label
name
our
is the same
columns,
from this table,
and then
right?
we label the
Oh,
values.
let's do that.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, what about it? What
Oh, never mind. I had it mixed up in my
Okay.
head.
Yeah. Okay, I think everyone got it, and we move on to the next question. Don't erase because it's related. It's easy as well. So you have now the spa. How about if you want to do just one SQL statement, but you want to insert
Yeah, I know.
two entries? It's also very simple, so
Yeah.
should be. So I want to move on to the next problem. So basically what you do is you just, from your previous SQL statement, you just put a comma
Squash code 2.
and use the same values again. Meaning, insert into cd.facilities.
17.5.
I have the column names. I don't need to repeat that because I want the same column names. And then values, the list of values, value 1, value 2, value 3, comma, again, a list of values. So that's it. So this one. You got it? You don't need union. You just need this. A comma, and then another this.
Oh.
Okay. We'll move on.
Oh, never mind. I get it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different. Don't need to. Just have another statement. Next, we made a mistake when entering the data for the second tennis court. The initial outlay was 10,000 rather than 8,000. You need to alter the data to fix the error. So how do you change the data? Yeah, so correct. Now, use that word you said, modify. Google that. How to modify data MySQL. And you'll get the keyword right away.
Update.
You guys got it?
So
Where
I don't see how to where to locate the exact value of the.
So basically the answer for this is select the table, which is cd.facilities, then set which column name, which is initial outlay, equals the value you want to change it, 8,000. And then we want to restrict to what row, because if you don't say the where, it would update everything. Where column name, FACID, equals 1. Okay? It might also work when you do where name tennis court 2. However, you may run into a problem that there may be another tennis court 2. But there won't be another FACID 1. You won't see another FACID 1. Okay? Next, we want to increase the price of the tennis court for both members and guests. Update the cost to be 6 for members and 30 for guests. Again, inflation, we want to increase the price, right? I'll give you a clue. It's the same. You just need to update because you already have it. So you need update and set. And you also need where. The only thing that you need to add now is the IN clause. Where IN.
So I
That you can. I can help you as well. So
but that's kind of powerful, but they're also
this time around,
recommended that one website where it'll automatically
going back, everyone got the correct answer. It's basically update the table name, and you set the column name equals to the whatever value you want,
They're used
comma,
a
the
lot
other
when
column
we're
name
talking about
to the other value that you want.
usernames.
And then you also use the where clause,
I used one recently.
and then
because I wanted
specify
to
your
validate
column name, which is
that
FACID,
data that
parentheses,
was
1,
named
comma,
as
2.
comma.
Or you
So
can also do the like,
what
find the
expression
pattern,
tells me
tennis court,
whether or not
and then the
this
percentage sign if you put it at the end so you can grab all the tennis courts.
12 digits 0 through 9.
Okay.
So it's pretty easy, but
Next question. We want to alter the price of the second tennis court so that it costs 10% more than the first one. Try to do this without using constant values for price. So don't use don't just change it to the value of 10% basically.
Have like tennis court to be multiplied by 10%.
Yeah, so the way you need to do this, you basically need the update. You need to do the set. However, now we're introducing the concept of subqueries. Subqueries. So I'll give you a clue. Let's dissect this. The first query that we want inside so we have subqueries, meaning the inside query. The inside query first grab the second tennis court. Okay, that's the first clue. Grab the second tennis court, and then grab the, what's the cost? I think should be both, I think. Yes, both, it changed. So grab member cost and guest cost, and now you wanna increase that. How do you do? You,
Update? Account?
yeah, I mean, you update it, correct. You're there. But first you select this,
Where are you?
okay? Should be both, I think. Yes, both, it changed. So grab member cost and guest cost, and now you wanna increase that. How do you do? You,
Update? Account?
yeah, I mean, you update it, correct. You're there. But first you select this,
Where are you?
okay? And now you have to do a calculation. So let's say given 5, how do I output 110%? So 5 times what? How do I make sure that it's 110%?
Product 1.1.
So 5 times 1.1, right? 10%. Okay? So try to Google doing subqueries first.
Sorry.
Okay? So as it's more complicated, let me quickly write what it would look like. So basically you would have what you've done. You would have update. You would have update, right? Blah, blah, blah. Set, because you want to change something, right? Blah, blah, blah. However, when you do this, you just don't put 5 times 1.1 wrong. This is wrong. This is hard coding. Equals, you do a subquery. You select. You do a select again. So in here, it's a select. And then to give you the clue, blah 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 column name, then multiply by 1.
Oh, okay.
So what happens with here is this subquery will get first the value. The value that you get here will now be set here. Okay? Just don't forget, because the question is we want cost, so you want to do this twice. So member cost,
Oh, yeah.
guest cost, something like this. Okay? Again, we're still doing the same. We're doing update. However, when we want to set something, it's set equals to a query. Meaning, set equals select something times 1.1. What happens there is the select, let's say member cost times 1.1. It gets resolved. It gets a value. Once it gets a value from that subquery, that value now gets to be set in this one. Okay?
So we need to update some things out here.
Okay, I'll give you a clue again. I'll write it down and I'll let you solve the subquery instead.
Sure.
Okay? We'll make this clearer. So we start with update, right? What do we want to update? Table name.
City,
Okay? And then, what do we want to do next? Set.
We want to set it.
Okay? We have two costs. We can start with one. Which cost do you want to start first?
Member cost?
Member cost. Now we have the equal statement. I want you now to write a select statement here, comma. Another select statement here. And then
Where do you want to do that? Fast.
it says I want the second tennis court, so this should be
Passage one.
correct. People here who hasn't was not here last week, totally fine. Just ask your seatmate how to build a database. Again, please help them. So we need to build a database called fkdemo. It's not a swear word. It's basically just foreign key demo because we're using a foreign key demonstration here. Build a database using create database name, semicolon. Don't forget to use the database with use space database name, semicolon. And now I remember everyone was here. So let's get up to speed. Everyone has a database name fkdemo. And the first part shows you what I'm expecting if I hit describe products. Meaning, this is the syntax, another clue. And I want you to create a products table with this column names, with this data type, with this attributes. Okay? So right now, again, for those who weren't here last week, please help for those who weren't here last week. Okay? Get them up to this part, and then we can move on quickly. Because if we can move quicker, we can learn more on how to set up your databases for your project, for your team project. Okay? Let me know. I'll give you 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or maybe just 5 minutes to finish this build a table. And if your group doesn't know how to do it, just ask for me or ask for other people, so we can speed things up. Got to include the previous screenshot. Let me just add that quickly, because you won't be able to create the foreign key. You need this from the previous week. This is from the previous week. Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
on
describe
that.
categories?
Yeah. Sorry, because it was from the previous week. In the previous week, we built the database and built a table.
Hold on. So you can use an online tool and you can say,
Okay, I want to proceed fast with this one.
Yeah, this is
So,
now he's showing
answering it,
he made
this
a
one.
mistake. That's the one we had.
why do you,
We
why did,
changed it.
No, I did not change it because we were working last week and I forgot to add the previous table from last week,
Oh,
which, because you won't be able to create the foreign key for the next table. So quickly do this. Let me double check the syntax if there's a space. this is just a space. I think this is auto. So this is the SQL statement you have to do. Let me know if you get this output. Be wary of the space, column name, space, data type, space, primary space, key, space, auto underscore increment. Same goes with this. Column name, space, data type, space, not space, no. What's happening right now, we build an empty database, okay? Now we built tables categories, so the database is now no longer empty, but we have an empty table called categories. The next step we're doing is we're building another table called products. It's still empty, and while we're creating the products table, we're also linking it to the categories ID. So if I would quickly diagram that, so you guys would have visualization. What's happening right now is you have a categories table, and it has the ID, which is category ID, cat ID, okay? You now have a products table, which also has a product ID. However, I'm also using this. So this is a primary key. This is a primary key. And this is, I don't know how to denote a foreign key actually. Let's just say this is a foreign key. Something like this. Foreign key is basically a primary key of a table. Okay? So just a quick explanation, why are we doing this? Because we talked about first normal form, second normal form. We don't want dependencies, meaning if I don't do this, I would have category name. Let's say we have category description inside of products table, and we also have category ID. Let's say we have it like this. The problem with that is whenever we need to change something, we keep updating everything, right? So why not just put this in a different table so that when I update a name, I just update this, and I don't need to keep updating here in the products. To clarify it, because you can have MacBook, you can have Asus laptop, and all of them have the category called laptop, right? And now the problem is, you would have laptop, every time you have a product, MacBook, you would have laptop. If you have Asus, you would have laptop. And let's say 15 inch. The problem with this, if I want to change, I have to change every entry I have. That's why we, instead of doing this, let's associate this with ID1, create another table here called categories. So anytime that I want to change this, let's say instead of laptop, I call it mobile. So I can just change this one entry, and it still has the same number, instead of changing everything to mobile. That's one of the use cases of why we're using two tables and then relating them to one another. That's why we call it relational database.
SQL.
Structured query language. Yeah. Again, we want to avoid a use case of changing every category inside your products table. Hence, we remove the categories, other attributes of categories. We remove that, put and created a new categories table and just link it with the primary key of categories table. And again, if you use a primary key from another table and use it, it becomes a foreign key. Okay? Anyone done with this one?
Yeah.
Done? Who else? Okay, I'll start giving clues. The first one is easy, right? Products. Yes, this one is easy as well. Product ID. Oops, autocorrect. Product name. Category ID, right? Type is easy as well. Attribute would be easy as well because we've done it in the previous table. Okay? Now, what's this?
Category ID.
Correct. Correct.
Because it's a foreign key.
Where does my category ID live? With the reference
Categories.
clause? Can somebody else tell me? Where does my category ID live? What table?
Fields.
Categories.
What's it called?
So if you misspelled categories, you also need to change the spelling here. Okay? And basically we're in categories table, which you already know. There, we're done. Basically we created another table that has foreign key.
Messed up a lot of stuff.
It's okay. I think I posted the videos for last week.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So when we were doing extra, you know, the extra part, do we leave that blank or do we have to put null there? I noticed you didn't do it, but so for example,
So
before you added product
okay.
name and category, it had nothing in there. It was empty, and I'm like, do we add
How can I delete
not
this?
null or just leave it empty?
How can I delete this?
So the attribute, I said attribute 1 and 2, that is just a clue, but the attributes themselves are optional. So if you don't put anything, there's a default. What's the default? No. Meaning, you can have a entry without any product name if you did not put this. But if you put not null, if I'm the user, I insert into, and I say blank, SQL will say error because you said not null.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So what do you want to do? So you want category ID to be able to be null? Okay.
Yes.
So key null, yes. Okay. So let's
That's right. I misspelled it.
Just to remind you guys
Oh, it's
went
an
through
FK.
a single entry.
yeah, it's,
You guys
so you're already
already
using the FK
did
demo
the multiple
database
entries. So
because that's what they use
should be
state
fine.
lines.
Let's go as FK down.
Well, FK demo is a database, not a table.
I think I saw it already. I'll get back. There's something else to add for the products. Just quickly add this category ID, and basically your value 2 is your category ID. You can choose whatever number you want. So I can put 1, I can put iPhone here, and I could put smartphone and smartwatch here. That should be fonts. Okay. Okay.
Oh, there's a space.
Again, don't forget everything we learned because you're gonna use that for your paper. Hopefully, make it useful for when you're looking for jobs.
So what that does is that tells SQL that that's a literal string that you're putting in. You got to do it the second time too.
But I think the
Yep.
number don't need the.
Oh yeah, sorry. Correct. This is a integer. I don't need to put single quotes because single quotes are for strings and varchars. Good catch.
Now you can just select star from,
From categories.
yeah, and that'll show you like what's in there.
Man, spelling will get you in this.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh,
should
yeah.
I continue
So
to import?
SQL queries or even software development, a skill that you would really build is eye for detail and your typing accuracy.
Yeah, is there a way to switch to spelling after you create your database? Or is it like
Yes, you can Google modify, let's say, column name,
Yeah.
and you would end up with the keyword called alter table, I think. And it's easily, if you can do this already, you can easily fix that.
Okay, yeah, because I just got that point. My category name's named right, but my categories is named differently. I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really hard.
One thing to keep in mind when you're altering tables, though, is that when you try to alter column names or things like that, you can trigger a lot of problems because there are a lot of things that may depend on that name being the same. That doesn't necessarily get updated when you do that.
So again, what is saying, you may end up with an error. Let's say you misspelled this and you still used it, the same misspelling. Now want to change this, it might throw an error that say, oh, another table is using it. You can't just change it. So that's why you have to be wary. You might be able to have a workaround, maybe changing this first and then changing this, but you now need to drop the foreign key. And now there's a lot of things you have to do. And then now, because it's still small, you can just delete the table and just create it.
Yeah, it's great at that point.
Or there are application developers who've been using that column name for the last 10 years and nobody knows where it comes from. They just
Happens all the
you
time.
change it and you just broke like everybody's stuff.
All of that is dependent on it. So happens all the time.
So that's part of why NoSQL is becoming more popular, is that you don't have to care about any of those things anymore. You don't.
If it's working, don't fix it. Don't fix something that's not broken.
Don't fix something arbitrarily just because you don't like the way it's spelled.
Everything good? Everyone good? I would.
I add